Welcome to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, a pragmatic debate about, I guess, any and all things transportation. We are very happy you are here with us today. So I'm Wes Marshall. I'm a professor of civil engineering at University of Colorado, Denver, and author of Killed by a Traffic Engineer. And my partner in crime, I guess whose wife would love an option on the Waze app that avoids parkways, created by Robert Moses, is the one and only...
Hello, I'm David Zipper. I am a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative, and I write a lot about transportation, society, and technology.
That's great. Nice to meet you, David.
Always a pleasure, Wes. Always a
All right.
pleasure.
Yeah, all right. So before we get into the topics that we were planning to talk about today, I wanted to, I guess, maybe stick a spork in the road and ask you about something I'm guessing you no longer have, which is a commute. So if you do indeed work from home these days, maybe you can tell us a little bit about maybe the worst or the best, if you'd rather, commute that you've previously had over the course of your life.
The worst or the best commute that I've previously had. I do work from home. That's true, and but I've that's only been the last few years. Normally, I'd always commuted in DC or New York or Boston when I lived there. And I actually only got a car a couple of years ago when my
For the
wife and
first
I got.
time?
Well, not the first time, but the first time in like 7 years or something.
Okay.
Because we have a place that we go to out in like the Shenandoah, and we wanted to drive every now and then to get out there. So we were like, it just sits in the parking spot most of the like 9 days out of 10, and that's the way it is. But the commute that was the best that I had was in a job I had actually doing venture capital in smart cities and transportation like 10 years ago. I was only about a mile and a half in DC. And honestly, I biked. I just used a crappy old commuter bike, and it took anywhere between 8 and 10 minutes.
So you've never had a commute where you're just sitting in traffic for like 30 minutes every day back and forth? Like,
It's a great question. Have I ever actually driven in my commute? Like maybe for a summer internship in North Carolina when I worked in the North Carolina Department of Commerce in Raleigh on urban economic development. But I was very young then. Literally not for 20 some years.
yeah, no, it was. I've loved my commute for the past 20 years, but there was 4 or 5 years there in the early 2000s where that's what I was doing. I was sitting in a car, sitting in traffic
Is
every
that the
day.
Connecticut year? The
Yeah, those are the
Connecticut
Connecticut
year?
years. Actually, the
Yeah.
worst time within that was when I was the on-site engineer for a project. So I had like a construction trailer that was all mine, but I had to go almost all the way across the state, and I made a little extra money because they counted the mileage, but it was awful. Actually, to be honest, it was those experiences that sort of turned me into who I am today in terms of doing this sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
it was tough. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it.
Yeah, no, I even when I was like in high school, I just never really enjoyed driving. I kind of disliked it. It reminds me a little bit of Henry Ford sort of famously like hated horses. He used to say like he wanted to build a car partly because he just like freaking hated horses. Seriously. And I don't know that I feel that strongly about cars, but there was always been since I was like pretty young. I don't know about you, but like I just have never been someone who really enjoys driving. And now in the last, however many years as I've gotten more into sort of like urban transportation seriously, I've realized like, oh, I actually can give voice to this like visceral feeling I've had for a while, but I don't really like it that much.
Yeah, I do actually enjoy driving, just not here. Like driving
Yeah.
at a time and a place, it's just not in cities. Like so when I'm around here trying to get from place to place, I hate driving, right? So there's a big
Like rural
difference.
Colorado and stuff you enjoy. Is that what you mean?
I don't
The
know. I mean, I
mountains?
don't mind the act of driving. Like
All right.
I do like that. I don't know. It's
I'm neutral at best about it. I know that it's like cool among a lot of people who are like car skeptical. Be like, no, I like cars. I like driving. I'm like, I don't really like driving,
I
honestly. I'll be
don't like
honest about it.
cars. Like
like,
I don't know. I guess when you're like an American male, like there's always that guy, that'll open the hood and start telling you all this stuff. You're like, what are you talking about? Like I have no clue. Like
yeah.
all like the Jimmy Rod type stuff. Like so. Anyways, you're a lucky man that you don't have a bad commute story in your history.
I don't really have a terrible commute story. It's true. So
All right,
I
no, that's
thank
good to
you.
hear. I
Yeah.
like it. It's
Yeah.
good to get to know a little bit more about you too. And all right, so let's move on to the first topic. I guess I'll ask you what the word on the street is.
Yes. And word on the street is what we are calling now and in the future a little segment. We're going to talk about an issue in the news related to transportation that Wes and I think is something we have, it's important and we have thoughts about, and we'll share some information and then discuss it a little bit. And the topic today is really the sort of disaster and drama unfolding in Philadelphia and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, as well as in some other cities too, around funding for, in this case, SEPTA, the transit system for regional Philadelphia. And to me, this dessert should be a much bigger story because we're potentially seeing the collapse of a major American transit system for the first time in my life. There's a $213 million budget deficit that SEPTA is facing. That's and a lot of agencies are facing this now, as it's just sort of a combination of like the COVID emergency dollars disappearing, ridership being lower than it was before the pandemic still, and the cost of operations rising quite a bit in the last few years. A lot of systems are in pretty serious dire straits. And it's coming to a head in Pennsylvania with SEPTA, and also, frankly, actually with Pittsburgh, but SEPTA's gotten more attention. So, some quick stats is that if if um, if if the state of Pennsylvania, the legislature doesn't come through with funding really in a matter of days, there's going to be a 45% reduction in service across SEPTA, including the complete elimination of some of the regional rail lines, along with a 21% fare increase. The general manager of SEPTA said this budget will effectively dismantle the agency. That's his words. And it's really sort of day to day what's going to happen, whether the Republican controlled state Senate will follow the governor, Governor Shapiro, and the Democratic state House to provide emergency money. Otherwise, those cuts are going to hit. The service cuts are going to hit in a matter of a few weeks, just before school starts. And it's Pennsylvania is the center of it right now, but RIPTA in Rhode Island and CTA in Chicago, Kansas City, KCATA, systems really across the country are in similar positions. It feels like a real crisis. And Wes, I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, so this is a sad story because I felt like it was less than a year ago when I was hearing, I was in Philly for a conference last summer, and they were talking about the what's it, bus revolution stuff. Like they were talking about just reinventing transit and doing so much more with it. So to go from that, which was promising and exciting, to where they are now, it's tough. Like the fare increase, doesn't bother me much because you look at the numbers. It's like going from 240 to 290 or whatever it might be. But like cutting the service is something you can't come back from. It's
Yeah.
tough. But transit agencies are kind of in a tough position. Like I know in Denver when they're trying to figure out which lines to pull back on or to cut, they look at metrics like revenue per passenger mile, right? And if certain lines
Mm-hmm.
are making sort of less money than the other ones, they might take a line that might have a half an hour headway and say, oh, this line's making less money.
Mm-hmm.
Let's push it to 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what happens there is it gets worse and fewer people use it, and you end up eliminating the line altogether once that happens. Like to me, you sort of have to do the opposite and instead of half an hour, go to 15 minutes. See if you actually make that bus or whatever useful. See if
Yeah.
people use it. See if you can get that revenue up or however they measure revenue per passenger mile. Like that's a better way to go. But when the funding is at the higher level, it's a tough position to be in because, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I to be clear, I don't fault the transit CEOs for being in this situation. Like, all they can do is be super transparent with elected leaders and say, like, you guys are either going to have to fund us or our system could effectively go away. And as far as I can tell, that's what SEPTA has done. They've been very
Yeah.
communicative about this. But I think it's worth spending a minute just to explain, like, why it's why it's so devastating when you reduce service dramatically, as is being discussed here, because it's not like you can basically like ridership is a spigot. You can turn it on and off when you increase or decrease service. Like what happens when you're talking about a service, decrease of the magnitude that's being contemplated in Rhode Island and in Philadelphia is that a lot of people just decide, look, I can't afford to wait an extra 20 minutes for each one of my each commute going in and out, and people end up buying cars on the secondary market or whatever else. And there's a lot of studies, this, Wes, that show that once you own a car, you're going to drive it. It feels like a sunk cost, and once you lose those people, they're not coming back. And by the way, this is when you get into this idea of a doom spiral, because you reduce service to save money in the budget, and then you drive away the passengers, though probably permanently or semi-permanently, and then they take their fare bucks revenue with them, and you've created a whole new budget deficit that you then have to fix by reducing service. And this is a story, I actually put it aside, of the 20th Century American Transit. There's a book by Nick Bloom. It's a bonus if you're watching on YouTube. I'll show you the book, The Great American Transit Disaster. It's a great cover, actually, by Nick Bloom, professor at Hunter College, I believe. And this is the story of American transit in the 20th century. We kept reducing service and driving people away, and then lo and behold, you have a deficit again. So I really feel like this is sort of the scariest moment in my lifetime for American transit, because I don't know how we're gonna resolve this. And maybe some states will, like New York has funded MTA in a great way, but I really worry about Pennsylvania and a lot of these other places.
The way you brought that up, I was actually working on a paper earlier today that we're submitting to TRB tomorrow, Transportation Research Board. It was written by one of our master's students, Carlin Russell Carlson, and she was looking at transit recovery at the bus stop level in Denver pre, during, and post COVID, and seeing what sort of factors associated with it. And what you're looking at, say, is it like lower income neighborhoods, but pretty much from COVID across the board, transit was used a lot less. Obviously, there were some differences by some of those other factors. But when you look at which bus stops recovered in terms of at least heading towards recovery, in terms of getting back the original numbers they had in the first place, the ones where they reduce service are the ones that are having a hard time getting that recovery back.
Yeah.
Like, all the other factors matter less than if they cut out a bus stop for a short amount of time, or if they reduce the head. I mean, that sort of stuff, the service, because people start, like you said, start doing something different. They might buy a car, they might figure out another way to get to where they need to go, or change where they need to go, or whatever they need to do to get there, or figure out their life. And then when you bring back the transit service, they don't come back. That's what we're finding in that paper.
Yeah, that is my big fear, is like, if this service cut goes through with SEPTA, and then, and it's, again, like, I've never heard of this before. They're talking about shutting down entire regional rail lines, which is a huge deal. That happens, and a few months later, there's emergency money found. That's not good enough. A lot of those people are pretty much gone permanently.
Yeah, that's a good point. 'Cause figuring it out now will make so much more of a difference than pausing it for a month and then figuring it out later.
No, I think that's right. To me, there's a lot of news right now. I think that, the happiest transportation story of the year to me is congestion pricing in Manhattan, which is just such a wonderful success. This, though, is the biggest story to me for transportation right now, and it could end up being the biggest one, even compared to congestion pricing of the year, if things go badly. And I guess I'd just say, trying to maybe even linking it back to our other episode, because we've only done two. But in our first episode, we talked about fare-free transit, which is such a hot topic among many people on the left who support transit. And it's gotten so much attention with Mamdani in New York. And I just find myself a little bit exasperated that that's where a lot of the energy is going from a lot of people who support transit, because the left really does support transit, I think, is we're talking about eliminating fares instead of ways to cajole, push, prod, figure it out to get state legislatures to provide a lifeline for systems in Chicago and Kansas City and Philadelphia that are potentially going to face a permanent cutback in ridership and service. That's where, in my view, we should be paying the most attention and devoting our energies to.
It is hard to disagree. All right, why don't we move on to the second topic? I guess roundabout is what we're calling it. We're going to go back and forth on a topic of our choice.
Roundabout, own it. We got to own it, Wes. Welcome to Roundabout.
All right, man.
Where we're going to share a topic that each one of us cares about and wants to talk about. Sorry, I'm stealing your MC role. Go ahead.
No, I love the enthusiasm. All right, so my topic for today is bike helmets. So, you picked a topic last week that you were getting a lot of crap for online. Like, this is a paper that came out recently. I think it came out in like December or January on bike helmets and how much they help in terms of saving lives. And
What
it's,
journal is it? Just so people can find it if
uh,
they're curious.
I don't even know, man.
You don't know where your article was published?
Um,
It's not meant to be a trick question. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I can check. That's a good question.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
International Journal of Injury Control and Safety Promotion.
Okay. Got it.
So it officially came out in January of 25. I think it was published online in December of 24. But this is honestly a paper we wrote quite a long time ago, but it kind of just sat around for various reasons. And, what we essentially found here is that, like, we're only looking at crashes that did happen. And we're trying to understand, well, how much does a helmet matter in terms of severity of that crash, in terms of, whether it results in a fatality. So we use this metric called the helmet effectiveness factor that they use for motorcycle studies that NHTSA came up with, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And we basically found that helmets do help. And they save lives. If a crash happens and you're wearing a helmet, you're probably better off. This does not mean that the crash is more or less likely to happen. We don't know that. But I still got a lot of, I guess, emails and stuff from folks like, how dare you say we need to wear helmets? Like, so it's kind of a topic that I thought is worth discussing because for many years I was probably in a similar camp where I didn't want to portray bicycling as something you needed to wear armor to do in an urban area. So I often didn't wear a helmet. Then I went to Australia where it's pretty mandatory because if you don't have one, you'll get like a $200-something ticket. So I started wearing one more often there, and I ended up buying like a nicer helmet. And you're like, oh, this makes a difference. So I started getting used to it. And then I remember coming back and like the chair of my department's like, you might as well wear a helmet because we're only paying you for your brain. Like nothing else matters. Like
Oh,
keep
that's
that
sweet.
safe.
That's
So
nice.
since then, I've just been sort of wearing a helmet when I bike to work every day. I'm not trying to promote it, but if I do get in a crash, yeah, it's less likely to be a severe injury or fatality.
Well,
So what do you think?
Well, I would just sort of, I mean, this is a topic that gets everybody fired up
It
on
does.
social media when it comes up. And the first thing I always hear is like, well, but in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
nobody wears a helmet. So, and in Copenhagen, nobody wears a helmet. So Wes, what do you think about that?
Well, if you look at their data, there are a ton of head injuries. Like that still
Hmm.
happens. They're not dying. So it's hard to say. Like, you know, if we could build streets where, you're separated from, big SUVs, it makes perfect sense. But we often don't do that. You're mixed in with those. So, um, there is that research where Ian Walker, he's a professor, I think, in the
Hmm.
UK, where
Yep.
he did that study where he wore a blonde wig, and cars are giving him more space with the blonde wig than with the helmet.
And long haired blonde wig, right?
Blonde, yeah. So
Yes.
his point is like the best thing you can do is wear a long blonde wig, and you'll probably be safer. But maybe that's true, but at the same time, that falls into the same trap of the early Sharrows research, where they only looked at where bicyclists and cars were in relation to like the curb in the parked cars. They didn't actually look at safety outcomes, and it got into the MUTCD without any safety research.
Yeah.
Subsequently, we've shown that they're actually worse than nothing in terms of safety. So that placement thing is only a part of the story.
Well, but I think part of, if I were to channel my inner bike activist, I think part of why people get really frustrated by the whole dialogue around bike helmets, and they do get very frustrated. Remember, one of, I think, the heroes of street safety folks these days is Jennifer Homendy, who leads the National Transportation Safety Board, regular cyclist, big supporter of complete streets. And she got a bit attacked a few years ago when she was saying, people should wear helmets when they bike. And I think part of the exasperation and frustration with people who say that or leaders who say that, is the idea that, like it's sort of, it's victim blaming. It's basically saying, it's putting attention on something cyclists can do and putting the spotlight implicitly away from the public sector's role of establishing protected lanes that basically negate the need, conceivably, of wearing a helmet 24/7, like, like in parts of Europe. So I don't know. I think that's why people get really frustrated about it. And maybe I'll give you a chance to preempt the hate mail you're likely to get after we do this
No, I
episode.
I totally agree with that. But to play devil's advocate, like the same people are saying you should wear a seatbelt when you drive. Like, it's not that different, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the same sort of thinking that kind of the onus is on you to some
Well,
extent.
yes, I don't know. I mean, wearing a seatbelt when you drive, that sort of, it's not like that comes at the expense of doing other stuff to protect car occupants, I would say. A campaign saying cyclists wear a helmet, you could argue, does come at the expense of other efforts that would be more beneficial to supporting cycling and safe cycling. I think,
Yes,
there's a limited
I'd
amount of
rather the
oomph
money go
behind
into
cycling.
safer infrastructure than education on
Yeah.
helmets, right? I totally agree with that.
Should we have mandates? That's the next
No,
question.
no, I
Should
don't
we
think
have
we should
bike
have
mandates?
mandates.
Helmet
We should
mandates?
not have bike mandates. I mean, that's not the point of this. But I did meet a guy 2 weeks ago that he was not wearing a helmet. He was hit on his bike in a hit and run. He walked away from the crash. Tried to walk home. Halfway there, he realized he couldn't walk any further. So he called his girlfriend. She came to pick him up. Went to the ER, and he had like a brain injury. And he was out of work for 6 weeks. He's still
Oof.
recovering. Like he was telling me, he's annoyed. When he goes to trivia night, he can't remember any actors' names anymore. Like for some reason, that's just gone from his brain.
Oof.
So he's like, I wish I had a helmet on. And now when he bikes, he wears a helmet. And his mom yelled at him for not wearing a helmet. Like,
Well, maybe the moral of the story is, sure, tell public officials that helmet mandates are not the number one priority for cycling, and we should be focusing on building protected space. But that said, if you're going to be biking, wear a helmet just for yourself, for your own good.
well, when
Is
I was
that
in Australia
basically where you're coming
too,
out?
I met with they had the bicycle mayor of Sydney, right? And I think her name was Sarah M. And I met with her over coffee, and she had a bike helmet that looked like the kind of hat any woman might wear around town. Like she had to get it from from some Scandinavian country, but she's like,
Mm.
it's comfortable. I don't feel like it's a bike helmet, and like that's a big thing I'd say too. Is like we need better helmets that. Like I remember I first bought one of those 1,000 helmets. I mean, a while ago. I loved it. I had it for quite a bit. It got stolen recently, and I bought a new one. The exact same
Really? Wait,
thing.
your bike helmet got stolen? I was just going to make a point. Like, I feel like nobody steals bike helmets too because
Well,
they're
they
kind of
stole the bike
gross.
too, man. Like the helmet
Oh,
was
okay.
attached
Well,
to
they
it.
sold the bike. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was gonna help you make a point. I
No,
was
that's a good
like
point.
invest in a good bike helmet, because honestly, nobody ever steals those things,
No,
because who
but
wants
I
a
bought
used
the
helmet?
exact same helmet, like same color, same style,
Yeah.
and I hate the new one. It is not comfortable. Like they changed
Hmm.
something within their designs,
Okay.
so I don't even use it. I had to buy like another one that I actually do like, but it's been a pain in the neck. It's hard to find like a decent helmet if you want one. So I think that's part of it too. Like if we could make kind of cooler helmets,
We need a better
it would help the
helmet.
cause. Yeah.
All right. I bet we're gonna get some emails from helmet companies now.
Yeah, I think I might have put them on blast. I did not mean 2,000. I did like your helmet for
That's
like
fine.
10
Or
years. I
maybe
love that helmet.
I believe it. We should probably should I go with my
Yeah,
topic du jour,
please
if you
do.
will? What I would like to talk about is something that I've been thinking about and I've been hearing a lot about because I live in Washington D.C. and it's all about abundance here. Everybody loves abundance if you are in the center left. It's a hot topic on Capitol Hill. It's sort of like the first, as someone was telling me, it's like the first, policy big idea that the center left is excited about since the Clinton years. And I think there's actually some truth to that. So I want to talk about what abundance might mean for transportation. This is something I read an article about a few months ago in City Lab. And if you want to, you could just Google and find it. It's also on my website. But for those who don't know abundance, it's a concept that Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, two journalists, have really been promoting, although there's a lot of other forces behind it now. It's very, very popular among the Silicon Valley set. But the idea is that there's, America would be much better off. And we could pursue a lot of goals that the center left has and the left period has if we were to address supply side constraints. So if we were able to build more clean energy and produce more doctors and get rid of cumbersome zoning laws, we'd have more housing, we'd have more of the stuff that we want. It'd be cheaper, more affordable, and we could actually live in a better world. And the idea is like, it's not just a matter of like throwing more money or transferring money to get the things that we want in society. We should be looking at how to get what we want more cheaply and faster. That's how I would summarize abundance. Now for transportation, it comes up a lot too. This idea that abundance promoters talk about that, hey, look at how expensive it is to build the subway. Look at how we've messed up California high-speed rail. We have to like reel in onerous labor and environmental laws and unleash, all kinds of transit construction. And for me personally, I worry about that kind of orientation because when I think of like abundant transportation, I think most Americans are just going to think of like a lot of cars and a lot of highways. And I'm not sure that's constructive. And I have actually what I think a sort of a proposed solution for it, because I think abundance overall is actually a good framework. It just needs some refinement for transportation. So without explaining what I think yet, I will kick it over to you, Wes, and say, what do you think about abundance applied to transportation?
Well, I started when we brought this up as a topic, and seeing a lot of people over the last month or two talking about abundance. I
Yeah.
noticed that a lot of them would couch their statements by saying, "Well, I haven't read the book," and then they would talk for 10 minutes about abundance.
They do
So I
that with
didn't
my
want to.
articles too, by the way. People say,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I haven't read your article, but here's what I think about it.
So I
Anyway,
read
sorry,
the
back to
book
you.
over the weekend.
Oh,
I
did
read the
you?
book. I
Oh,
did.
that's
Yeah.
great. Oh, good for you. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that I get out of it is like, right after they say we need to build and invent more things, like when they said like more of what we need, like to me that's a really important part of it, because we don't need more highways, right? So that's not what we need. Like we need more mixed use, walkable, bikeable places. Like,
Yep.
so is that if we can build more of that, then like they're heading in the right direction. Like it's hard to disagree with the red tape arguments they're making. Like
That's right.
California high speed rail. Like I see people like Andre Stwani of like the New Urbanists folks like talking about trying to reduce the red tape, trying to make it pink, like that sort of stuff for years. And like that all makes perfect sense. Like the points you hear about, the cost of a mile of underground subway in New York versus Paris. In Paris they have big, strong unions too, but it's way cheaper there. Like this sort of stuff is important. Like it shouldn't take as many years. I know like a couple of years ago they were replacing the MIT bridge over the Charles River in Boston. You probably know that one.
Yeah, of
Well,
course.
and I think what I heard, like originally they built that bridge like in 30 days, like a couple hundred years ago. And it was under construction for like a year plus or whatever it was. I don't know what the numbers are specifically.
Yeah.
It's like there's something wrong with this. Like why can't we do things as fast as we could? So to build more of what we need and actually want and to do it quicker, it was hard to disagree. I didn't agree with everything in the book for sure, but like that basic premise,
Yeah.
it sounds
No,
good, right?
I think that's right, and particularly in housing, I think it's completely right. But in transportation, I think it begs the question of how do you define what we need more of?
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
And that's what I was wrestling with in that article I wrote for Bloomberg a few months ago. Because to me, I think a sort of way of deciding what we need is not just simply saying, "Well, I want this and you want that, so we'll argue about it." I think it's a matter of understanding that there's a lot of externalities in transportation that we haven't priced, particularly from cars. When you drive, you're creating negative externalities in the form of pollution and safety, but also in the form of just congestion on other people. And that I think is like the fundamental failure of American transportation, surface transportation, is the failure to price externalities. And and abundance has a weird relationship with externalities, because when you read that book, and I've read it too, that Klein and Thompson wrote, that when externalities come up, it's usually to say, well, we've gone too far to worry about the environment, whatever else. We've slowed things down too much. But I would say we actually need to think about externalities proactively in transportation, because some of the best ideas right now are things like congestion pricing in New York, which I mentioned already on this recording. And because we're pricing negative externalities of cars in Manhattan, which is long overdue. But you apply that kind of a thinking with congestion pricing elsewhere, you could end up conceivably with less construction of roads, maybe. That's fine. That's good. That's something we should be celebrating. So I guess that's my perspective is we need to find a way of incorporating externalities, maybe creating like a collective abundance idea to sort of guide us in transportation toward the investments that we should be making and away from those we shouldn't.
Well, I think a lot of people would say we need like more suburbia, right? Like that's what people want. That's what the market wants.
Well, if you can pay for it, sure, right?
I
It's
don't know. I always have a hard time with those arguments. Like we have, so few, like I mentioned before, like walkable, bikeable, mixed use places, and those cost so much more to live in. To like buy a house
yeah,
in that sort of place, there's a major premium to do so, right? So like when people argue that, oh, the market, people want the suburbia, like it's not true. If that was the case, then why are these other places
why is
cost so
Manhattan
much
so
more?
expensive? Yeah,
Right. But a part of that too is a supply and demand problem. Like we don't have enough of those places.
that's right.
So if you take that mindset of, build what we need and more of it, like we need more of that. So I mean, if we can do it in that mindset, and it would be a good thing. But I could
Mhm.
see how it could be used for evil pretty easily, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, like the oil and gas industry has long talked about abundant energy, and they don't mean windmills and
No,
or
they
wind
don't.
farms rather, and hydropower. They're talking about a lot more fracking and drilling. So careful what you wish for. We should probably do a little bit of Q&A. But I would just say if people are curious to hear more about the abundant stuff, um, like that, there's that article that I wrote, and I actually find this really important because I'll tell you, if Democrats get power again, we're going to hear more about abundance and legislatively.
All right, so I can see a question here. Steven's asking, what would abundance and safety look like?
That's a great question. Abundant safety. I mean, I could basically just sort of like wax poetic and say, oh, you can go anywhere you want to go without worrying about your safety, no matter how you're traveling. That's sort of a nice pithy line, perhaps. But I think to go a little bit further, actually try to bring something kind of like more rigorous. I think it's really a matter of, again, and I think the way I think of it is trying to um, account for the negative externalities that people create in the ways that they travel. And I think that means, again, finding ways to curtail the danger that's created by people or by vehicles, frankly, like an F-250 or whatever, where the driver doesn't have to, or owner doesn't have to worry about the risks that are created for others. Frankly, if they want to buy that car, they should just be taxed at the relative price. If that happens, I feel like everybody, um, you end up with a better outcome for society writ large, is what I would say. But Wes, what do you think? Maybe you have another point of view.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'd want abundant options that are safe. So, like, your kids could walk to school, that I can cross the street safely and not have to walk a half mile to get to an unsafe crosswalk at a signal. Like, that sort of stuff, like, to me, would. I don't know how well that links to abundance, but like that sort of thinking, like to let everybody have the opportunity to be safe and not just those in vehicles. Like we need more of that. We need abundant safety in so many more ways than we focus on now, and like, that would be. I mean, not a game changer, but it would be the right mentality, the mindset that we need to start actually making a difference in terms of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, safety should be available for any mode. And right now, you're quite safe in the US if you're in a car, and you're really not if you're in another mode. That to me is an inherent bias that is just it's abundant for some and not for all. That's why I keep coming back to this idea of collective abundance. Let's think about trying to maximize the well-being for everyone.
Yeah, that's kind of a good way to think about
I thank you. Thank you for the compliment. I got a question. Actually, before we did the recording, somebody asked a question. It's not just somebody, um, but it's Ken McLeod. Do you know Ken? Who's
it.
the head of? You do. Okay, he's the head of policy at the League of American Bicyclists. Really good guy. Lives in Virginia, not Northern Virginia, but like real quote unquote Virginia. And he's really interested in this whole question of bike helmets and he wanted to. Did you already see this question out of
I did not see
curiosity?
it. No.
Cool. No, it's a real question. It's a good question. He was asking if we know anything about the relative relationship, or just the relationship, I should say, between bike helmet laws and bicycle mode share.
I mean, I remember looking into this maybe 20 years ago, around the time B-Cycle and the first like dock shared bike systems were coming into play, because
Oh,
they
wow.
were,
It's an early bike share. Okay.
yeah, this is probably 2007, 8, 9, right? So
Okay.
Denver, I think, got the first one. DC had a tiny one, but Denver had the first big one after the DNC, 2008. I think we opened it in 2009, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
those companies were trying to go to cities that had the mandatory bike helmet laws, and it was problematic, right? Like being able to get on a shared bike and having to figure out where you get a
Yeah.
helmet. So they were having a lot of trouble with that. And I would just remember looking at the numbers back then. I remember it being a modest difference, but not too much. Like the paper I did in between then and now, Dan Paykowski, he's a former,
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
I was on his committee. He was
Is
a
he in
former
like
student, sort of.
Norway or Finland or
Yeah, he's in
something?
Oslo. He's a
Okay.
professor there. But
Cool.
we did a paper about, like, the thinking that he had was that by making bike helmets mandatory, you're taking some people that would bike and putting them behind the wheel, like putting them in a car. So I remember we were looking at data for like 16, 17-year-old, like who are known consistently as the most dangerous drivers out there. Um, and like if we could put them on a bike, it'd probably be safer for everybody. But the bike helmet mandatory laws were kind of putting them behind a wheel or kind of egging them in that
Mm.
direction. It was hard to
Mm.
connect the dots, but there was a little bit in there in that paper, and there's an interesting idea.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there is some connection, but I don't. It's hard to nail down because it's so many other factors involved.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, do we have time for another question, or what do you think?
Yeah, here's one from Eileen. She asks, "What safety advice?" and she puts advice in quotes. Do you think is just terrible?
Oh God. Well, settle in, everyone. We've got another about an hour to go here. So I think, well, I would say that there's a book that has some thoughts on this. It's like Slaughtered by a Road Designer, or no? Oh, it's Killed by a Traffic Engineer, right? It has
Actually, I
some
think I
thoughts
see it
on this.
behind you for once. Is that up there?
It is up there, and
All
it's
right.
behind you too. We both have this book behind it. This is Wes's book, for those who don't know. What safety advice is terrible. I think one that I truly hate, which I don't think is actually safety advice, but it's presented as such, is that cyclists should stay as far to the right of bike lanes as possible. That is an easy way to get clipped and hit. And taking the lane, I think, is not a show of arrogance or anything else. It is simply a way to stay safe. I hate that advice with great passion. Another one I hate is make eye contact when you're at a crosswalk with the driver. I find it very interesting thinking about how that applies to someone who is blind, or how you're supposed to do that when the car has tinted windows, as a growing number do. Hate it. But Wes, I feel like you're going to have a couple here too.
Well, I think I would say that it also matters who the advice is coming from, right?
Hmm.
So the advice coming from the state DOT, like if the state DOT is telling you to, I'm going to get personal here, look both ways, it might not be the best advice. But if you're telling your kids to look both ways, then it's better advice, right? I mean, because you get into the exact problems you're talking about in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
what happens if a blind person can't make eye contact or can't look both ways, then it seems like we're victim blaming, making it seem like they deserve to
Mm-hmm.
die, which is just totally not true. And there's 1.2 blind people in this country. There's 12 million people that are visually impaired. So
Yeah.
using those sort of statements is not fair to do. Like the other one I kind of joke is when they put a big billboard high over the road. They tell you to keep your eyes on the road.
Those billboards, they're not even billboard. They're signs are like the flashing
Yeah.
PSA signs, right?
It's like I was
Those are a
trying
pet
to
peeve of
until you
mine.
distracted me. And there's
Yeah.
actually plenty of research I found, like going back to the 50s and 60s, saying that those sort of advertisements are worse for safety, but that didn't change anything.
Yeah, I've actually written about that. I wrote a Slate article about why those PSA highway signs are either useless or counterproductive. I mean, there's no evidence that they accomplish anything. I firmly believe the reason why we still see them all over the place is because nobody really is opposed to them. Car drivers don't really dislike them, although they do dislike lower speed limits or road diets. But also, I think that there's just some state highway officials that get a kick out of coming up with a pun, like
Yeah, that is part of it, but they also have to spend a certain amount of their money on safety,
they do.
and the lowest hanging fruit, I mean, the easiest thing to do is put it into education and to throw out some billboards and
Education.
PSAs
I mean, these
and
things get so
yeah,
stupid. I was just talking to somebody about this recently. Like, do you know that in Georgia, the governor of the highway safety, whatever, the highway
yeah, yeah.
safety office of Georgia spent money on a pedestrian safety fashion show? I'm not kidding. Where you wear brightly colored clothes and signage and walk down the runway. I'm like,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, like the extent to which these don't get me started, like we really need to rein in a lot of wasteful, either unhelpful or counterproductive safety efforts that are done, especially in my view at the state level.
Well, there are those places that have made it mandatory for bicyclists to wear high vis like vests or something. I know like there was an Irish politician trying to do this. They did it in other parts of Europe for a little bit, and it might have gone away. I don't know the exact status of it, but there was a paper I think from Paris that made it seem like safety got worse after they did that in the places they looked at.
Yeah, I mean, look, we could talk about this for a long. It's a great question. So is it Eileen? Thank you for the question. But I mean, you could talk about cars too. There's something famous called the Peltzman effect,
Yep.
which you're probably familiar with. It actually relates to, I think it's from the 70s by an economist in Chicago called named Sam Peltzman, who basically found that seatbelt mandatory laws didn't actually reduce crash deaths, because once you start requiring people to wear seatbelts, they figure, okay, I'm safe. So they start driving faster, more recklessly, and the driver occupants may be less likely to die in a crash, but then everybody who's outside of the car is more likely to die in a crash. So you end up with not actually making headway. I think that paper may have exaggerated the point, but this idea of a Peltzman effect, where you have a behavioral response to a safety rule, is, I think, real and something that's worth contemplating.
No, it's real. I mean, I call it risk compensation usually, and the
Mm-hmm.
example I often give is my son. He's just turned 18, but when he was like 4 or 5, when he was riding a bike, like the story I often tell is when you put a bike helmet on him, he biked like he thought he was a Marvel superhero, and he'd like be biking into walls. But when you took the
Mm.
helmet off of him, he biked like a sane person. So I
Well,
mean,
that's like the most. What is that famous example? I forget who came up with this, but the idea that the safest car safety measure would be a
the spike,
spike
yeah,
coming out of the steering wheel aimed at the driver, because you know that driver is going to be damn careful
right.
about how they're driving.
Right. So
So
there is definitely a shift in behavior. Like the safer you feel, I mean
yeah,
the yeah. So that's what makes the bike helmet stuff and all this stuff, much more complicated than even my paper could show. Like we were just showing, like literally, if you get in a crash, like this is the difference in
yeah.
severity levels. Like we're not trying to say more than that. I mean, that's the thing people need to sometimes realize about research is
Hmm.
it doesn't say that bike helmets are just safer overall. Like that's a different question and one that's hard to answer.
It's fair enough.
All right. So I guess let's move on to rail drinks.
Yeah, rail drinks. It's 6:45 p.m. East Coast where I live. So it's happy hour time, and I've got a beverage. I don't know if you do, Wes. What are you drinking?
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, so I'm drinking. Actually, until recently, we had a brewery right here on my campus, the Tivoli. Like that's
Nice,
where the student union is. There's a big brick building,
nice.
like a quarter mile from here, not even. And they've been in business since like 1800 something. They still make beer even though the tap room is closed. So I have one of their beers called the Outlaw from the Tivoli here on campus. And one of the
Mm.
other universities on here, Metro State, I think they just started a
Hmm.
beverage analytics program, so they're taking over that space. So I'm curious to see how that
Beverage
turns out.
analytics. That's a degree that sounds really freaking fun, but I'm not sure how well people do at the exams after they've been studying, if you will. Then I have, just because you were giving me crap earlier for not drinking whiskey, just to show that I can do it, I have Lefroy a good Scottish Scotch that I some people say it tastes like asphalt. I think that they're Philistines. I think it's actually quite tasty. Are you a Lefroy fan?
I can't remember having it. So,
Really?
yeah,
Oh, either you love it or you hate it. It does have like a tar, like I don't know,
it looks like regular
ambiance.
whiskey. I'm looking at it right
It looks
there.
like it, but
Yeah.
it's some listeners are going to know this. It feels a little different. But I'll simply say cheers and to our second episode being
Cheers.
on the wraps. And before we bid everyone adieu, if I could, just a couple quick words. Just thank you all for joining us. As we are learning as we go, and we welcome all of your feedback. You can reach Wes and me at lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. And you can contact me on my website, davidzipper.com, which has email address as well. Wes, are you still trying to avoid anyone ever reaching out to you?
For the most part. If
Yeah, I
they really
respect
need
it.
to find me, they can.
I respect it. But I will say that our next live stream, if you'd like to join us live, will be on Monday, August 11th at 6:00 p.m. Eastern, just like today's was. And if you do enjoy this podcast, we'd be really grateful if you tell a friend or two about it. We're just starting and figuring out how all this works. Reviews really matter as well. And again, we very much welcome feedback too. Again, it's lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. But with that, I will simply say thanks for joining. And Wes, always a pleasure.
Yeah, and everyone get home safe.
Absolutely.